Anyway.
He's like a water.
Outside of that, how's everybody doing?
Good.
Good.
Had some cake and cookies today. So
Man,
great.
Office Bake Off.
Office Bake Off.
Office
Too much
Bake Off.
sugar.
I came in not in the top 3.
Oh, that's all right.
No.
Maybe you were
didn't.
top 5.
And you soaked it in alcohol,
Yeah.
too. I just imagine you just, like, doing this, like, smoking a cigarette, like, you know, like some Bad News Bears thing.
Let me
I
tell
like
you.
that you have me smoking.
Yeah, because I just imagine the Bad News Bears, like, whoever their chef was.
And like most of it is just ash.
Yeah.
Like you haven't ashed in forever because you're
Exactly.
just dumping booze in your cake.
And then you
Yeah.
ash it into the cake.
No, I have to admit, you got me to do my baby with lemon face.
Well,
Everyone
Well
should try
played.
the pumpkin pie. The pumpkin pie is really
it
good.
was probably everybody's favorite, if not the most highly rated,
Yeah.
because of the booze.
Good news is I'm drunk as now.
Nice. Well, let's get going. All right. Well, how are you? I hope you're also drunk. Welcome back to another CineFix Now Roundtable. This week, what are we talking about, guys? We're talking about characters that have been played by multiple actors.
Yeah.
And this sort of came up this week because there's been a lot of talk. Daniel Craig has been talking about whether or not he's got energy to keep being James Bond, and then he does. He is going to do more, and and a second ago he wasn't, and so, there's no telling. I mean, but one of the things we want to talk about is when a torch gets passed from one actor to another in the same character, times that it's worked and times that it hasn't, and maybe we'll get into conjecturing about why it works, and because obviously every situation is a little different.
Yes.
Right? Obvious franchise to talk about this is Batman.
Yeah.
Because we've had multiple Batmen, we've had multiple Jokers, we've had multiple, practically everybody.
Yeah.
Catwoman,
Catwoman
Catwomen.
might have the most because, not only is there the stupid Catwoman movie, but
Yeah.
there's also the TV
shows?
show had 6 different Catwomen or whatever.
Yeah, 3.
Yeah.
The original
3,
series
yeah.
had 3, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, Batman's always so interesting because we're all at that age that, we're familiar with all the Batman, starting it with Adam West. Because I don't even know who the guy was who was in the old-timey black and white, whatever.
Yeah.
So let's just say Adam West is where it starts. And then, of course, Michael Keaton, and then on with George Clooney. I think everyone sort of feels like George Clooney was maybe the worst, but I don't know.
I mean,
Well, he had the worst movies.
Yeah. He was
in
or worst movie,
Yeah.
singular, plural. I can't even remember.
He was in the worst position to succeed.
Yeah.
He didn't
Oh,
have
yeah.
a chance.
Yeah.
Val Kilmer had a time, and I think Val Kilmer did a decent enough job.
He did
Yeah.
all right, yeah.
As the movie reviews at the time said, he has a very good chin to be
Very
under a
good
towel.
chin. Yeah.
But it's funny because I think the Christian Bale thing is the toughest thing because I've heard so many different ways to look at Christian Bale. Some people are like, he's a great Bruce Wayne, but he's not a good Batman because they don't like the Batman voice. But then you also have the situation with he's also Christopher Nolan's Batman, and is
Yeah.
it that Christopher Nolan is great? And that's what
Right.
makes a great Batman.
I also think that because he was part of a complete reboot, he was a brand new Batman.
Yeah. Sure.
That affords some leeway, whereas Batman Forever and Batman and Robin were still inexplicably in the same universe as Tim Burton's because you have the same Alfred, you have the same Commissioner Gordon.
Yeah.
Batman also has the thing going behind it that it's based on a comic book, and something like Batman has been written by totally different people over
Yeah.
the years, has been drawn in totally different
Right.
ways, and so
Yeah.
you've already seen a million different types of
A
Batman.
million different Bruce
Yeah,
Wayne faces.
exactly.
And that's
so
when we decided to have this discussion, we batted around some names, and almost all of them of characters that have multiple actors playing them are they started in a different media. They were not
Yeah.
characters original to the screen.
Right.
The
Right.
only character I can think that was original to a screen that has been recast successfully is kind of Captain Kirk.
But only
But
once.
only a
Counts.
little bit.
Yeah.
But
And again, that's a situation where it's a complete reboot.
yeah.
It was a completely different. I mean, not completely different universe because they
there was a very
deftly
distinct
rebooted
point in time.
Yeah.
But I also think the thing about Batman is I feel like he's always the same character. I don't feel like the Batman and Batman Forever is that different from Christian Bale's Batman. Maybe they talk
Except
a little
for Adam
different,
West.
but the core is still the same.
Well, the
right?
tone of the Batman changes with the Batman movie.
My thing is I want to know who people's favorites are and why. I want to know Christian Bale's my favorite Batman, but I don't know if it's because he's the best actor. I don't know if it's because Christopher Nolan made the best Batman movies, or if even it's a very juvenile thing. I remember when Michael Keaton was Batman when I was a kid, I was like, oh, that's lame. He's this skinny dude. And then Christian Bale Batman Begins was jacked, and I was like, yeah, that's what Batman's supposed to look like. Is it just that easy? It's just that simple?
Look, I mean, you kind of gave two answers there. There's
Yeah.
there's the this isn't what I think Batman should look like. based on my experience with the comics. And there's also this is my favorite version of a Batman movie.
Yeah.
So this is my favorite Batman.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to think of a situation now where there is, my favorite character doesn't line up with my favorite movie in that franchise.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because, like, thinking of James Bond, my favorite movie is From Russia with Love.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite Bond is Sean Connery. But part of the reason that I love Daniel Craig is because the character that they have him playing reminds me so much
Sure.
of James Bond in From Russia with Love.
Yeah.
So.
I think the only time that for me that it really differs is like my favorite Superman movie is Man of Steel.
We know.
And but my favorite, I think about Lex Luthor isn't really in it. Jesse Eisenberg's gonna be Lex Luthor, but my favorite Lex Luthor is Michael Rosenbaum from Smallville.
Okay.
And so it's one of those situations where like it's so different because it's a TV version of Lex Luthor, and I don't like any of the cinema Lex Luthors. I think Gene Hackman was terrible as Lex Luthor. I think Kevin Spacey was terrible as Lex Luthor. I don't think there's been one good one.
Well, both of those, and I would argue, Man of Steel aside, I don't know that any of the other Superman movies were particularly good.
No, they're
Yeah.
not. They're
Because
not great.
going back and looking at Richard Donner's Superman movies they're
so
really
dated.
weird.
They,
Yeah.
they
And-
do
and there's
the
like-
thing that
there's
they
like-
say they're gonna do. They
Yeah.
are Superman movies.
Yeah. There's a character in the movie that is named Superman.
But then
Man of
they
Steel
really,
was not called Superman.
they
No.
really dwell on how much they've got Superman in this movie.
Yeah.
But going back to Batman, like, I'd actually like to talk about the Joker.
Yes.
Because the thing is that, within the movies and the TV show, they're all so different. But for me personally, my Joker is Mark Hamill from
Yeah.
the animated series.
Right.
And
I can
it's
see
such
that.
a different kind of thing. And
Yeah.
you can't really go by, like, physical performance because it's a voice. But
I think there is also a way to look at it in terms of like when you were introduced to the character.
Yes.
Like, because like as a kid watching Batman the animated series, like that became the Joker that you sort of, for lack of a better phrase, fell in love with. And so every other Joker is now measured against that. And then I think there's no other way to top that.
But I think also though, the Joker for me he's a terrifying character, right? Because you don't know what he's gonna do. And I was never terrified of Jack Nicholson's Joker. I always felt there was a disconnect. I felt the things that you saw him do on screen were terrifying, but he was not terrifying. Like how he scarred up his girlfriend, for instance. Sicko, right? But he wasn't scary at all. He was sort of this rotund, silly.
He was
Joker.
scarier as Jack Napier, I thought.
100%.
Yeah.
But you get Heath Ledger, and to me, Heath Ledger was intimidating. He was tall. He was scarred up. He was like he didn't
Crazy?
give a F. Yeah.
Well, I do think that Heath Ledger fit into The Dark Knight better than Jack Nicholson fit into Tim Burton's Batman.
Yeah.
Even
Yeah.
though Tim Burton's Batman is still my favorite Batman.
Wow.
And
Even more than Dark Knight and Batman Begins, huh?
100%.
Wow. All right.
I know. I'm sure I'm in the minority in that. But,
The original Batman is good, though. It is.
oh,
Very
I
good.
love it.
Yeah.
I love it. And I think largely it's because I saw it when I was a kid, and
Right.
that's
Yeah.
the Batman that because Keaton is still my Batman. My parents wouldn't get it for me on VHS, and I was staying at my grandma's for the day one summer, and I tricked her into buying it. So that's how I got my
That's
VHS
amazing.
copy.
Right?
of
That's
Batman,
amazing.
yeah. But anyway, I think that is largely because every other Batman I've compared to Michael Keaton because that was my Batman. That was
Right.
my first Batman. you
Yeah.
know? And I've just enjoyed the first Batman movie more than I've enjoyed any of the others.
Yeah.
Now, James Bond, my introduction to James Bond was Roger Moore.
Right. Totally.
Because those were the first couple movies that I saw. So even Sean Connery, in a weird way, I always compared to Roger Moore because I started with Roger Moore.
Yeah.
So Roger Moore has always kind of been my Bond, even though like I know objectively he's not the best Bond. But those movies are the ones that I have like the most fun with.
Here's the
I
real
love
question.
the Daniel Craigs too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think Daniel Craig's Bond matches the tone, and that's what I like so much about Roger Moore and Daniel Craig too, because like those two characters, those two versions of Bond really match the tone of the movies that they're in.
Right.
And I think that's an important part of passing the torch and just so long as everybody's on the same page, because like Timothy Dalton was the same Bond as Daniel Craig,
Right.
but he was stuck in Roger Moore James Bond.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
So like that didn't work. Like
Yeah.
I thought Timothy Dalton was ultimately he was a great Bond. He was in
He
the
was.
wrong movies.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Pierce Brosnan was just like
Yeah. If Timothy Dalton were like 30 right now in Star of Spectre and stuff, we would all love to.
Oh yeah, yeah,
But
exactly.
here's my question. is Lazenby anyone's favorite? I feel bad for him.
Aside from Lazenby himself,
I'm not
People
sure
in
about
Australia.
even
maybe?
that, I
Like,
don't think it's true.
I think he would probably admit, like, that was a weird turn. That
he walked away from Bond too. It was his
He's
decision
gone on
not to
record
do
being
it.
like, look, I was a rock star there for a couple of years, and I my brains out and did all the drugs, and it was awesome, and I have no regrets.
And that was such a good
Like,
movie.
that's basically
It was such
that
a
was
good
a
movie
really
that
good
no one
movie.
saw because
And nobody gives that movie credit
Yeah.
because it's Lazenby, because he wasn't a real Bond, but
Yeah.
he was a real Bond. He was just only in the one movie.
But he also had first off, I think there was something said about coming after a very popular version.
Yeah.
So it's like what's happening right now with Doctor Who. It's like Matt Smith was so popular, Peter Capaldi has a lot of problems. I think because of that, also it's the same thing. It's like coming off Sean Connery is so iconic. Lazenby never had a shot, but I also don't think he had a lot of charisma either.
No.
So there's something to tonal matches.
Yes.
Like the type of, if you pick up the mantle of a new character, you better be swimming upstream with the director and with everybody else, and so that tonally your version of that character belongs in the movie that you're in.
Yeah.
Which Captain Kirk in
Yeah.
the most recent Star Trek movies, I think, is a really good example of that.
Well, and
he
I
fits
think-
great in that world.
I think the tone of any given rebooted or recast movie with the iconic character like that, it also, I think, heavily determines which is your favorite Batman or Bond. Like,
Yeah.
do you like the Dark Knight universe?
Right.
Then Christian Bale and or Heath Ledger have a really high chance of being your favorite. If you found that a little bit overly dark and pessimistic like I did, you might drift toward the animated series
Yeah.
a bit, you know?
I agree. Going back to Superman real quick, I love Terrence Stamp as Zod. He's probably my favorite Zod. But if you put him, even in a new costume, if you put him in Man of Steel, people would have laughed because he's so like it's too much, and he's so
Right.
like kneel before Zod, and it's just like and it wouldn't have fit, and it was like so a time and a place. That maybe that's part of it too. Maybe it's just because once again Cesar Romero. It's not that he was a bad Joker, other than the fact he would
was
shave
a-
his mustache.
He was a spectacular
But,
Joker
yeah.
in
In
that
that universe.
series.
thing.
Yeah.
And it's like the Penguin, for instance. Like I've never really liked the Penguin, but I like the Penguin in Gotham,
Yeah.
right? Because he's always been. They've
fantastic.
never known what to do with him.
And maybe
But
that's
he's still
something
writing
else
them.
to picking up a character from a previous actor is like making sure you have a different take on it. Because I think that was Pierce Brosnan's problem with Bond, is that he
Yeah.
was just sort of like I'll do kind of what Roger Moore did,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean,
and that was it. You know?
it's similar to remakes. You know,
Yeah.
it's like Ocean's 11. You make it because they didn't get it right when they made
Make
it the
sure
first
you
time.
have something new and relevant to say.
Yeah.
Now I know Sherlock Holmes is one I always think about too because
Yeah.
it's hard for me because Benedict Cumberbatch is my favorite, right, of Sherlock Holmes, but I also like Stephen Moffat's Sherlock is so amazing that I can't separate the two, and I don't know if would Benedict Cumberbatch as the Sherlock Holmes and Guy Ritchie movies, would I love him as much as the Moffat version? You know what I mean? Like, is it the writing? Or
I
is
would
it
argue,
him?
yeah, because I feel like the Moffat and Guy Ritchie's Sherlock, I feel like are decently interchangeable.
I feel like they're so different. Really?
See, yeah, and that's honestly sort of why I never got into the BBC Sherlock. But part of that is because I was like, I kind of feel like I've already seen this. I don't know.
I feel
I
like
feel-
Downey Jr.'s was more like Iron Man. Like I felt like he was like all the weird bromance stuff was like a lot.
I feel like Guy Ritchie's is more interchangeable with Elementary, with Johnny Lee Miller in Elementary.
Oh, see, I
feel
haven't
like
seen
those. It's
I disagree with that.
And that- and
Because
that's
he's
weird,
such
too.
a drug addict and like cool guy.
Regardless of how you feel, how different Cumberbatch and RDJ's portrayals are, I think Cumberbatch would have been fine in Guy Ritchie's universe because I mean he's a little bit more he's less jovial.
Yes.
Like he doesn't joke as much,
He's
but
not really
he's
playful
equally
at
a
all.
dick. You know, so
Certainly,
yeah.
they cut
Yeah.
that, yeah. But he's
Yeah.
also not playful at all. I felt like RDJ's was too playful for Sherlock Holmes because I read some of the books before. I don't know because. I was going to do a show on it. And so I read some of the books or some of the short stories, and I feel like Benedict's is very close, but also Moffat's scripts are very close. I mean, there's things from the original short stories from way back that go.
oh yeah,
into
they're
the
all
new
based
ones.
on
Yeah.
the
Exactly.
Hounds of the North.
Yeah,
And it's so close.
But then, and okay, so maybe that's something else that we can touch on here too. Is how much does a similarity to the source material matter?
Yeah, exactly. And how we see that
yeah.
character.
So that's
yeah.
another reason why. Because I prefer Robert Downey Jr.'s Sherlock. I've never read any of the short stories, but I prefer it because I feel like he's a real person.
But that's the other
Because
thing.
that's the thing. Like,
Interesting.
yeah, I feel like he's a more grounded character, whereas Benedict Cumberbatch, I'm like, I don't. Like he's interesting to watch and everything, but I don't feel like that person exists. And I think it's the sort of more personable side that RDJ has.
Yeah.
That is kind of it's more relatable. It's more accessible.
But I suppose,
And I think that's that's my preference to spend my time with.
I understand. I get that.
but I suppose it also matters if you even care about the source material, because
Right.
like you said, you haven't
I've never
read
read
the
a
book,
Sherlock
so
Holmes book, yeah.
so you don't care how much the character matches up with what it's based on.
Well, that's another thing that makes Batman even more compatible for having the torch passed around, is that like the source material varies wildly in terms of who's starring in it. You know,
Yeah.
James Bond and Sherlock Holmes are all
It's just
written
the
by one guy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just the one thing. Are there any characters now? And now this, go vote right now, by the way. But the Mutt Williams versus Jar Jar debate is up, and we talk a lot about Indiana Jones and the
Yes.
future of Indiana Jones and the potential for it. So, what would have to transpire for a character that is originated on screen by an actor to be taken over by another actor effectively? And what's an example of that happening? First of all,
It's Captain
but-
Kirk and
Yeah.
Doctor Who.
It's
Captain
changing
Kirk,
the
Doctor Who.
universe.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to change the universe that the people are in some way in order to make it work, because Captain Kirk, it's like nobody really wants to compare Chris Pine, but you have to go. It's like, well, William Shatner, Chris Pine, the movies, the worlds, they're totally different, so I don't have to compare them.
yeah,
Well,
that's
I think part of the-
loophole.
I think part of the reason I like Moffat's Sherlock, and this does go along with Indiana Jones, is because it's set in modern times. And I don't know, like, can they do that with Indiana Jones, or do they have to stick it in the World War II, like that era?
Well, that was obviously the most successful of the two Indiana Jones movies, is when he was fighting Nazis. And if
Yeah.
you're going to put Chris Pratt in it to do younger Indiana Jones things again, the danger is, like, one, Pratt is about the same age as Harrison Ford was
right.
when he started doing Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
So there's no, like, well, it's the young Indiana Jones.
There already was a young Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
It was on TV,
Exactly,
and I
exactly.
watched it.
So
And River
it's
Phoenix also. And
it's a really dangerous game to play with recasting it and just doing another one of his
Yeah.
adventures in 1939.
Yeah.
So yeah, would you have to put Indiana Jones in present day, and he's got
But
that's Guardians of the Galaxy.
That feels
the
like you're
thing.
really like going too far in the other direction to me. Like, it's one thing to put Sherlock Holmes in the present day because he's so, like, he's been in so many other contexts. He's so iconic.
I feel like if they ever make the adaptation of the game Uncharted, that's gonna feel, because the character Nate Drake feels like Indiana Jones.
Yeah, I was going to bring
feels
that
like
up
a
too,
more
because that's
modern.
that's the modern Indiana Jones thing.
But I also think Indy would lose something, because he could you still have him have the whip like today? Like, would that
Yeah.
make any sense?
So much of the charm
It would,
of him is that
they would
he's...
make him. It would be like Bionic Commando.
He
Like he would have like a thing that shoots out.
He can't have a cell phone, though. Like, that would be
Yeah.
so, like...
The other thing about a character that's been originated on the screen and then like just recasting it, at some point it becomes a situation where it's like, well, why don't you just make another movie? Just
Yeah.
make it a
Right.
different movie about a guy having an adventure. Like, why do you need to make this Indiana Jones?
Yeah.
You know?
yeah, like, you know why, and then that feels really
Yeah,
crass.
and that feels
like,
really-
the reason is because we wanted...
Because we
$400 million
know you're gonna go see an
instead of
Indiana
100.
Jones
What?
movie.
But is Indiana Jones so much more popular than Harrison Ford? Because they had a TV show, but did it even last that
Yeah.
long? Like, I think the two are so
And
intrinsically
even
tied.
he had to guest star on that show. There was
really?
he showed up as a 50-year-old Indiana
Yeah.
Jones
Oh,
as
man.
in Young Indiana
You-
Jones
you know,
Chronicles.
I had
yeah.
no idea.
Another character, John McClane.
Right.
Yes.
Like, could there ever be another John McClane?
It's gonna be tough.
That's a real Bruce Willis
Yeah.
role.
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
know?
I mean, Bruce Willis, like, they didn't want Bruce Willis for the role, but Bruce Willis took the role and made it his own.
Yeah.
So then to take that and give it to somebody else, that would be weird.
Also,
Right.
it just doesn't, like, John McClane, like, I know that you definitely, you defended him admirably in Detective Wars, but, like, there isn't so much mythology to that character where you really aren't just thinking, why didn't you just make a cop
make it
saves
another
everyone
cop.
movie?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
But also, John McClane is so different from the first movie to the last one. He's hardly really John McClane anymore, right? Like,
Well, the last one.
he's some
the last
weird
one,
indestructible
A
robot.
doesn't count.
yeah, like I feel like after the third one, he wasn't really John McClane anymore.
Yeah,
I feel like
he
was
was
a
sort of
superhero. Like you're right, like a killer robot. Also, I feel like going back to Mutt Williams, who who you're using right now in Worst Wars. It's the last Die Hard was kind of like the last Indiana Jones, where they had like the son character, and like, are we going to pass? Is Jai Courtney now going to star in a bunch of Die Hard movies? Shia LaBeouf going to star in a bunch of Indiana Jones, and that's interesting because you don't know if they're just doing that or if they're really testing the waters to see like.
Oh, they're 100% testing the waters. That also speaks to passing the torch of a character that an actor originated, and how much more difficult it is. That like, we shouldn't recast Indiana Jones. We should get Shia LaBeouf to be the
Mutt
next
Jones.
Indiana Jones, sort of, but not actually Indiana Jones. Like it would be Mutt Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal, whatever the. Well, and here's another one that I thought of. And granted, these are based on books, but Jack Ryan.
Yeah.
Is another one.
There's a TV show now they're going to make of him.
Yeah. Jack Ryan is all over the place, and is the character being, and Jack Ryan in particular, is such an everyman. He's guy that gets thrust into extraordinary circumstances,
right?
Which is the same as John McClane. And it's the same as Indiana Jones in some respect. These relatable everymen that you can just pass from Harrison Ford to Ben Affleck to Alec Baldwin because Alec Baldwin was Jack Ryan.
Yeah, he was.
That's what I was forgetting. The Hunt for Red October. That was a Jack Ryan movie.
Well, I think the problem with Shadow Recruit is they were trying to make him more like action guy. They were trying to make him a little more James Bond, but he's not that guy.
No, he's not.
He's
That was part of
like
the
you
problem
said,
with it.
sort of the everyman.
Even though I didn't mind that movie, but you don't think that he's Jack Ryan for the movie. It was a good movie if it's just Chris Pine.
Exactly.
Like if it had actually been Chris Pine learning how to be a spy, I would have loved that movie.
Totally.
But it
Somebody
was
should
supposed to
do
be
some
Jack
sort
Ryan,
of
and it's like, wait, that doesn't really add up.
It's funny though, because going to Star Wars real quick, and this is only twice, but like for me, I actually like Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan slightly more than Alec Guinness. Maybe it's because he got more time, but for me, I was like, I get a real like warm feeling from him being in that movie, and also part of it is I think he's the only really good thing in those movies.
He's the only one.
Seriously.
After the first one, he was like, George, you do your thing. I'm gonna do mine.
Do you think they put him in a fake beard before they cast him for episode 1? They're like, let's just make sure this works out.
Let's just make sure
okay.
you're gonna look good in a beard and a mullet.
You don't want a situation like The Rock with Hercules with his like alpaca beard and you're like, don't even bother.
No, but I do
bother.
think, in spite of how bad the prequels were, I agree with you. I think Ewan McGregor was a much better Obi-Wan than Alec Guinness, but even that's hard to say because like Alec Guinness was barely in the original trilogy.
Yeah.
Like, he showed up as a Force ghost. In the subsequent movie, and in the original movie,
But he
gets
mostly
killed at the
speaks in
midpoint,
truisms, like Force Ghost or not. He's like, you have to trust yourself. You have to let the Wookiee win.
He's really more of an exposition ghost.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
But
It feels like he's in so much more of those movies than he actually is.
He was obviously very important to Luke, so he's important to us, but he wasn't that much of a character.
Right.
Yeah. Like, and Alec Guinness is fantastic,
and
but like,
Ewan McGregor had to carry the first the prequels.
Absolutely.
So.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so just to recap and sum up, what did we decide here? We decided being based on other source material is the easiest way to pass a character back
other
and
source
forth.
material with a universe within that source material, I think.
If an actor originates it, then you better be setting the new movie in a different time or place or universe.
Yeah.
And then what did we decide about Jack Ryan? Jack Ryan's a super everyman.
Well, I think trying to be consistent because I think they changed his character so much that people weren't interested anymore.
Well, I think they did that with Shadow Recruit. With all the other Jack Ryan movies, Jack Ryan is just like, I'm like a crusader for the truth.
Yeah.
And that's all there is. And that can kind of be anybody. Look, we may or may not have decided something today. I think we talked about a phenomenon in a kind of an interesting way. I still think Michael Keaton is the best Batman, and I'm standing by that. So, so let us know what you think about all this stuff in the comments down below. Who's your favorite Batman? What character that an actor originated in a film should get a chance with another actor? Let us know what you think about that down in the comments below. It's kind of a homework assignment. Click like and subscribe. Stick around CineFix for all the rest of our movie stuff, and we'll see you next time.
feel like we need to write all that on a whiteboard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no,
Really
that was.
confusing.
You know,
Right.
we didn't
hopefully
really.
hopefully you're jotting down notes.
We didn't really get to the Terminator recastings, and I guess those
No.
are
There are
John
like
Connor
5
one.
John
Oh,
Connors.
holy shit. We just wrapped up realizing there's a whole section of this conversation we didn't have.
Yeah.
Yep.